The go and live buttons. All right, we're live. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm Izzy and Anthony. I'll be your host, and I have a wonderful guest with me today that you're going to learn more about. We have a series coming up with this. So keep tuning in. Make sure when you see the events that you click that reminder so that you're reminded to tune into this so you don't leave it just to chance. I'm here representing the Business Growth Lab. So that is a Facebook group that we have here in Facebook. And I'm bringing to you a series of amazing guests with some beautiful knowledge to help you in growing your business, but not only your business, also the self-development that is a necessity. I'm a business therapist and I specialize in marketing, specifically with the psychology of buying and making sure that your business is ready to scale. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony to let him tell you a little bit about him.
Well, thank you very much, Izzy, for having me on. I'm going to be straight up. It's gas. Actually, I do talks regularly myself, but I still crap myself every time before I go to speak. I don't know what it is, and it's not my first rodeo, but hey, you got to love it. My name is Anthony Beale. Where do I begin? My Facebook group is called Map Your Future ABA. It's a place where you go from A to B, and when you get there, you realize you want to go to another A. I'm live there every Wednesday at 1 o'clock GMT, and I share what I would consider life changing, powerful information every week. My own background, I'm an ex hotelier. I spent 20 years in the hospitality industry in senior management roles. I've been coaching, training, consulting for the best part of 30 years. And I know I look so young. I don't look old enough to be able to do all that, but I am. And now I specialize really in working with groups of people that want to develop themselves personally, professionally, and work with their teams as well. And what I teach them as well that works for teams works well for families as well. My passion is to work with professional parents. That's who I kind of want to focus in on more than anything else. So that's just a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that is what we're talking about today. This balancing act of how do we find the balance of parenthood within entrepreneurship? Because I know so many of us go into entrepreneurship because of our families. Now, it might not be everyone's reason, but a lot of us do. And then we realize like I want more freedom so that I can be a parent. But then we're like, oh, running my own business takes a lot of time and energy too. So where we find that balance, and let's start cracking that open.
Wow, I mean that's a nice opening question there, Izzy. Thanks. I think you threw me under the bus there. I'm kidding. Well, I suppose it's really to get a kind of handle on, well, what does balance mean in the first place,
Mhm.
because that's going to be very different to every single one of us, because everyone has different things going on in their life. I mean, some people have got young kids, some people have got teenage kids, some people got college going kids, and then other people, then they have people in their family who are disabled, they need extra care. And there's so many different things going on. But I think really, for my own understanding of the word, it's to understand who we are as individuals, human beings first. So we're all spiritual beings. We have an intellect. We live in this body. Now, I've just explained 3 planes of existence in the space of 20 seconds. And no wonder we get bloody confused, because then we have our environments to contend with. And that is external environment, or physical environment. And then we have our emotional, internal environment creating all this chaos.
Yeah.
But I think really it's to take a step back and start working out, well, what's most important. And I think that's really the starting point of getting balance, is to work out, well, what's most important to you. And I think the one thing that so many of us, especially as parents, we can forget to look after ourselves.
Mhm.
And we end up putting everybody ahead of us, so our partners, our kids, and then in business, our clients, or our teams, or our staff, depending on the size of the business. And everybody seems to be looked after. And then we seem to run out of energy, time, everything to even remotely look after ourselves. And when that happens for too long, eventually we're going to be in trouble. And it's something that I try to teach my clients regularly, whereas If you don't look after yourself, in due course, you will need to be looked after. And it's not selfish. It's not selfish to put time aside for you, because if you don't put time aside for you, you're not going to be able to love the people that you love, to give them what they need,
Mhm.
because you don't have it to give.
Yes. I completely agree. And I think so many of us, we go into business and we have this idea of what we want it to be like, but we don't strategically plan for that. Now, I was just talking last night with someone and we were talking about like time blocking and making those appointments with yourself, for yourself, with your family to ensure what comes first. And I love that scenario of the bucket where, you put in the big rocks first versus putting in the sand first. So when was this realization for you that you were like, I have to rework and redefine what balance looks like?
Oh, it's funny actually, to a degree. I mean, I'm in business coaching and all that kind of field for 14 years. So to me, I'd all this mastered, my behind I did. I was definitely what's known as the barefooted cobbler, for the want of a better word. I tell all you how to live your life, but no, don't look at me, don't look at me. And it was oh, I think the pandemic was kind of the start of my awakening. I had a kind of a particular week where, if I look at 2019, everything was, from a financial point of view, was my best year ever. I was looking at new cars, holidays, upgrading the house, all of this stuff. And 2020 came along, and it looked even better. And I'd signed my biggest client ever in February. And in the space of 5 days in March, I went from record-breaking year to zero. Everything was
Mhm.
cancelled, lockdown. And because at that moment in time for my life, I was 50% family, 50% work, 0% Anthony.
Mm.
So when work kind of that hit that wall, I wasn't able to cope. I wasn't able to bounce back, should we say, because I'd no other parts of my life I had no parts that were balanced. I was completely out of balance, for the want of a better word. And that kind of started my journey. At the time, it was hell. And there was definitely days where, oof, I thought about dark parts of my life, very dark. But there was always a part of me, that kind of little, tiny little part of me, that just always kept, just keep going, just keep going. And it was really only when I kind of hit rock bottom, really. I was cutting my own hair. I had a big, scraggly beard. And I looked at the corner of myself and I said, Jesus, the F and state of you. And kind of that's when I realized things had to change, but I had to go really deep within. I had to really figure out, well, what's most important to you? And to me, family is first. I can survive without money. I can survive without pretty much anything, but I can't survive without my family. And that's what kind of the starting building block of building back up what's most important. I had to get really clear on, what do I really want? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want to have? And when I was clear on that, I could start breaking down the things that weren't serving me anymore. Because people form habits and habits form futures. And my habits at the time were terrible. But systematically, I was able to replace a bad habit with a good habit, replace another one, replace another one. And that to me is how you, when you're really down on the ground, how you get yourself back up. But it starts with getting super clear on what you want, what's most important to you. And once you have that part, and it gets a hell of a lot easier to say no. And that's the key thing in time management, actually. By the way, you can't manage time. That's a misnomer. That's completely BS. You can only manage yourself. And
Yes.
I liked what you mentioned earlier on there a moment ago as well, Izzy, is scheduling. What gets scheduled gets done. What
Mhm.
doesn't get scheduled gets forgotten. And it's so important that you put the two most important resources we have are time and energy,
Yeah.
without
And
a doubt.
And I can speak to that. Like I used to do that. I was probably the queen of it. I would put time on the schedule for myself and even that's a good step. But then if a client wanted to something, I would gladly give that time up. And before I knew it, I was feeling down, I was feeling overwhelmed. I felt like I was heavy carrying a lot of things and I just kept taking on because I didn't know how to say no. And That's a powerful
So
thing.
harsh for us entrepreneurs. It really is. I mean, one word I learned, and I did it. I actually did a little bit of counselling in that period of time as well. And I want to bring that up for a little moment. Is I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Ireland, it's very frowned upon. Oh, you needed to get counselling, whereas it really shouldn't be, because everybody needs help. Everybody needs a different perspective. And that's really what counseling, friendship, relationships,
Mhm.
open relationships, proper conversations, masterminding, all of those different terms, it gives you a different perspective. And until we can get that different perspective, we don't realize how we have no boundaries, or we let our boundaries fall down. I mean, I used to let clients call me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
and I would deal with whatever they needed. And it took me a huge amount of time and energy and focus. Say, hold on a minute, I'll deal with this tomorrow, or I'll deal with this when I need to deal with it, or I'll deal with it when I should be dealing with it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm here for my clients, and I will, if I can help my clients in any way, shape, or form, I will. Um, but when I schedule something, and that was the key thing, is really I stick to my schedule now. For example, we booked this in a while back.
Yeah.
I said no to two or three things because of that, because I've committed. And that's the key thing, I think, in really growing, is making commitments to yourself.
Mhm.
And it's to develop that bit of discipline, and people don't like the word. To me, I think it's vitally important. I didn't like it, but now I know without it I'm in trouble. And discipline is giving yourself a command and then following it. So I am going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work on me. I am going to put that hour into myself every single day. I am going to do a little bit of a workout, even though I can't stand it, which I really can't stand working out. However, I like the result. I like that I
Yes.
have more energy. I like after I've done it that I feel better about myself. So I'm willing to be uncomfortable. And that's how we grow. Is you got to
Mhm.
be willing to be uncomfortable, but you have to learn how to say no. And sometimes that's one of the hardest things to manage.
Yes, yes, and you mentioned having a schedule, discipline, and one of those other words is routine. These are words that I feel like a lot of people fear, they resist. They're like, "No, I want more freedom." But I found that we actually get more freedom. We actually get to have more of what we want, what we crave. The inner talk, the inner dialogue of like the guilt and the shame and all of that tends to subside more when we do get into alignment with these items. Let's dive into that a little more.
I was like, oh wow! And again, freedom. What is freedom? Because freedom is the ability, and I like this, is to be able to think what you want to think. That is the very first part of freedom, is to be able to think, where so much of our thinking is habitual thinking. It's not thinking at all. It's mental activity. And what you mentioned are that inner talk. So when we're getting this horrible inner talk, that's not thinking. That is our conditioning kicking the crap out of us. Whereas until we learn how to get a little bit of discipline in our lives, and I love that you've mentioned routine. Routine to me is so. I didn't have one. I do now. And my routine, I won't give that up for anybody. I just won't, because I know what it's like without it. I know what it's like when it's like being out in an ocean in a big boat, big powerful machine. If you don't have a rudder on that, you're going to crash on the rocks, my friend. And
True.
that's what a routine does. It gives you control back of where you're going. And that's why it's so important to backtail again. What do you want?
Mhm.
I remember, I think it was a coach of mine. I think his name was Rich Scott. It was Rich, actually. Rich was a great friend of mine as well. And he said, Anthony, anything is possible, but everything is not.
Mm.
And it's to get really clear about what is that number one thing? What is the most important thing? Because we can do anything. We really can. But we got to choose what that thing is. We got to
Yeah.
choose what parts of our life that we want to build on. And to me, health is important. And when I talk about health, I'm talking about my physical health and my mental health. And
Mhm.
the mental side of it is so much forgotten about. But here's the kicker: what creates the physical problem? It's the mental problem first. Everything is created in the head first.
Yes, and speaking of that, I think that's a good opportunity to dive into when we have routine, when we're doing all of this and taking care of ourselves, but then now we have little ones or bigger ones to take care of along with us. And the importance of routine for children alone. I've noticed this. I have a gap between my two older kids and my youngest. So I have a 15, 11, and 2. And I didn't do a lot of routine with the older ones, and I've done a lot of routine with this youngest one, and I notice a large difference because routine actually provides safety. And when we were kids, I know we'd have like every Wednesday night was game night within the family, and we really looked forward to that. So how do you weave this in with being a father and a husband?
I suppose first thing really is again, it stems back to getting clear on what's important to you.
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, in a former life, I really focused on business coaching. That's what I did, and part of that was communication, and part of the communication was teaching people about congruency. And this is very like matter of fact now, as in words are 7% of communication, tonality is 38% of communication, and body language and behavior is 55% of communication. So, as a boss or as a leader, as a manager, if you tell your people to do something and you're not doing it yourself, it's not going to happen. Interestingly enough,
Right?
that rule stems in the home because we've all heard the phrase, do as I say, not as I do,
Right? That's
but
not
that's not
good.
going to happen. And I had noticed definitely things in my own house, things I didn't like. And, oh, the bloody kids need to do this and they need to do that and they need to do the other. But it was me that was creating the example because during the lockdown, when the shit hit the fan for me, I let everything, I let all routines out. Fear took over,
Mhm.
worry, doubt, fear, anxiety, and I just let all the good stuff slide. And it took me a while to, first of all, wake up, and second of all, realize I wasn't just damaging myself, I was damaging my kids. And I had to make a decision. I've got to be the me I want to be, and the me I want to be is a good dad. And that was first thing. That was hard to take because I love my kids, but I wasn't being a good dad. I really wasn't. And they look up to you. And even my teenage daughter now can be a little bit lippy.
I have one of those
but
too.
in fair, but in fairness to her, I mean, she's the most caring, kind young lady you'll ever meet. But that is because myself and my wife hopped on, and we started to realize what we're doing now is setting them up. And everyone says, "Oh, we should teach the young people to do this, and we should teach the young." We need to fucking do it. Excuse my language. We need to do it
It's
first.
true.
We need to be the example. I think Gandhi said it best: "Be the example you want to see in the world," and that includes in your home.
Yeah.
Because if you're not doing it, and you can't expect somebody to do something you're not doing yourself, and that's how so many businesses fail because they're out there, they're telling their clients to do stuff they're not doing, or they're out there telling their team to do stuff they're not prepared to do. If you're not prepared to do it, your team won't be prepared to do it. Your kids won't be prepared to do it because, well, why should I bother? Dad's not doing it. Why should I do it? Or the boss isn't doing it. Why should I do it? And the more you think about this stuff, family, life, work, it's not separate. The
Yeah.
same rules apply everywhere. And business is personal. Anybody that says it isn't is a moron.
There's different layers. I see people they definitely make business like not only it's not their child anymore, it's like them. And I do agree. I think we need to separate. It should be treated like a child. And the same scenario, I agree. I see so many coaches and consultants out there that are struggling to make it or struggling to up level. And that is the exact reason. It's because they are not practicing what they preach. And I always say, be your own case study. That should be your first case study is yourself in implementing what you are teaching.
100%. Because, and even from a growth point of view or a sales point of view, people are not idiots. People can smell shit a mile away. And I mean, if I'm like, let's say, for example, I'm in the fitness industry and I'm like 200 pounds overweight, nobody's going to listen to me. But there's people out there trying to convince you to do A, B, and C, but they're not walking their own talk.
Mhm.
And whatever industry you're in, whatever you're selling, whatever service or product, you need to be a product of the product.
Yes.
So if you're wanting to progress and develop and all those different things and teach people how to do it, you need to be doing it yourself. And if you can't stand over what you're selling, you shouldn't be selling it, is the first thing. Get out of it, get into something else.
Agreed. Well, and to overcome whatever resistance is there is what's going to make you a better coach or consultant, because let's be honest, I can give someone all the tactics, all the steps, and I see it every time. There's hesitation, there's doubt, there's imposter syndrome, there's all these other things that start kicking in. And those are the mindset aspects that get in the way, that cause the blocks. And they can cause the blocks even trying to find balance. Because I've had
Very
people,
much
they're
so.
like, I don't know what balance looks like. I don't know what I want. So, what if someone comes into this and they're
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what I want. I don't even know how to think what balance could be, or what type of parent or what type of schedule I want to have.
I suppose depending on the conversation and the style and the individual. Because at the end of
Mhm.
the day, when you're dealing with people who are vulnerable, and you have to have a little bit of empathy and consideration, but sometimes you got to tell people the truth as well. And I mean, it's up to you to figure this out. I mean, I can help you to a degree, but I mean, I can't wipe your arse for you. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of
Yes.
when we kind of one of the hardest things to realize in life is we're responsible for all our results. And that can be one of the hardest pills to swallow. I just actually did a post on it earlier on. There was a time in my life, just earlier before today, there was a time in my life where it was my parents' fault. It was the government's fault. It
Mhm.
was the cat's fault, the dog's fault, the weather, the timing, every manner of thing. But I wasn't focused on what the real fault was, which was me. I was my own biggest problem. And that's what we all human beings are. We're our own biggest problem. However, we're also our own biggest solution. And if we're not clear and we're not sure about what we want in our lives, we got to start getting clear and find somebody who can help us to explain these terminologies. Because when you go to Google Balance or you look it up in a dictionary, you're going to get 35 different definitions of the word. And that's just the word balance, because it can be anything from weighing to swaying of a vote and everything in between. But we gotta make up our own understandings of these things, these words as well. What does it mean to me? Um, what it means to me is that the different parts of my life are in harmony to the best of my ability. So I am not putting all my energy into my work and forgetting about my health, or I'm not putting everything into my health and forgetting about my family. So I mean, you will see moms and dads out there, and they fair play to them. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, they're like movie stars, and they've got the bodies, and they look so great, and yet they don't give their kids the time of day, and it's all for show. So it's really to work out and listen, that's totally okay if that's how you want to live your life. I mean, I'm not here to judge, I'm just reporting. um, but my point being is we have got to grow up um, and figure out stuff ourselves. But there's always help out there when you start looking, you'll start finding. But half the battle, the biggest thing that we have to overcome in life is ignorance. And ignorance is simply not knowing. And what's the opposite of ignorance? Knowledge. But here's the thing: to gain an understanding, we got to study. We got to find somebody. We got to learn. We got to put some hard yards in. And sadly, not everyone's willing to do that.
Agreed. And I like that you mentioned something there too, is it's sometimes it's just getting started, and it is taking that closer look. And sometimes it can start with, well, I don't like this aspect in my life. Okay, so what would be the opposite, or what would be better? And to just keep refining
Love
that,
that.
right, as we go along.
You've nailed the head. You hit the nail on the head there. And actually, I should have said that myself. Now, thinking, hold, Anthony.
I know you know
um,
this.
what you've shared there is a thing that I actually teach, funnily enough, to a degree. It's called motivational dissatisfaction.
Mhm.
Because sometimes the shit has to hit the fan. Everything has to go belly up, tits up, whatever language you want to call it. The crap has to hit the wall or the fan or whatever, because as human beings, for whatever reason, we seem to have to be in pain, serious
Mhm.
pain, before we'll actually change. But we can avoid that by utilizing motivational dissatisfaction. It's taking out a pen, piece of paper, writing down all the things you're pissed off with. And exactly what you said, we'll use one of the universal laws, which is the law of polarity. What is the complete opposite of that? And everything does have an opposite. You can't have an in without an out, an up without a down, hot, cold, good, bad, yin, yang. You get where I'm going.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's so important because as we move forward, we are constantly evolving. So our good now will continue to that image of good will continue to get better. That finding harmony, finding balance is not this like end goal that like is pinpointed there and we get there and then we're like, now what? It is an every single day finding balance and juggling, and what we need in each day can also change, just like the human body itself. The human body is always seeking homeostasis.
100% couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. There is, it's so, so powerful as well when we realize we do evolve. And that kind of got my mind moved to a different thing is we, as human beings, we're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up. But that doesn't mean that the next time we do it is going to happen, because we've learned. We've learned a great deal. We've figured out a great many things. But so many of us get caught up. Well, I failed before, so I'm going to fail again. And that's where we end up getting caught up in this doom fulfilling cycle of the crap is going to recreate itself. It will, because that's what we're focusing on. And
Mhm.
it's so important that we start to focus on what we want. Everything comes back to what we want.
Yes.
It really does. It's the starting point for everything. Balance, freedom, success. All of these different words are going to have different meanings for every single human being. But it's up to us to start working out what those terms mean to us. And then to ask people that are maybe further along the road than we are, and get the benefit of their experiences, because we're never going to learn everything that we need to learn by ourselves. That's not going to happen. We just won't have the time to do it.
So a question entered my mind. How do you teach these things to your kids?
Interesting. I you actually, let me see. I wonder if we can see that. This
Yeah.
is something that I use in all my teachings. It's called the stick person concept. It helps us to understand how our mind operates. Now, here's the kicker: nobody's ever seen the mind, and nobody ever will. But because our mind works in pictures, we need something to work with.
Mhm.
Okay. So if we look at the top part here, let that represent your conscious mind. The bottom part, let that represent your subconscious mind. And this part here represents your body. Now, if you notice, the circle is bigger at the top,
Mhm.
because the mind guides everything. And these things here at the top are our senses. We can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And that's usually how we're controlled. So how I teach my kids is help them to learn how to get a control of what's going on inside their minds, in their own imaginations, because it's through a controlled imagination, and that's where we can combine two of our higher faculties, which is the imagination and our will. Our will is the ability to focus. Is we combine those things and we can start creating what we want. Everything is created twice, first in the mind and then in reality. Okay. But to share that in my kitchen, I have a big, massive one of these things. Okay.
Awesome.
On the wall in my kitchen. And I use the law of polarity. On one side, you have the ignorance, and the other side, you have the knowledge. So, ignorance, when we don't know stuff, that's where worries and doubts come. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the worry and doubt leads to fear. The fear leads to anxiety in the body. So that's how the mind and the body is connected. Starts in the mind, ends up in the body. And if anyone's ever experienced a panic attack, which I have, it's absolutely horrible. You think you're actually having a heart attack. I won't go into too much depth on it right now because I don't
Yeah,
think we have time.
we're gonna go over that next week, and because 'cause we've both
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
experienced that, so we could dive into those stories
Yeah.
more.
But it starts in the mind. We think, this has happened. Oh my God, this means that's going to happen. Worry thought. Oh, I don't think I can handle it. Doubt thought. Fear kicks in. Anxiety. Anxiety then is suppressed. We don't express it. We suppress it. And that suppression sadly leads to depression. And the depression then leads to dis-ease. Always hyphenate that word. It's a body not at ease. And sadly, that leads to disintegration. However, there's an opposite to it. The opposite is ignorance. Or sorry, is not ignorance. The opposite is knowledge. And we have to start looking to gain knowledge for wherever we can get it, from books, we can get it online, we can get it through coaches, we can get it through all these different people, but we need to start looking for it. And then we have to study it, because until we understand it, we're never going to use it. But when we do understand it, we develop faith. Faith is the opposite to fear. Both fear and faith require you to believe in something you can't see. And I can tell you, I know which one feels better.
Yes, me too.
So the faith leads to well-being, and then the well-being leads to at ease, not dis-ease, at ease. That leads to us accelerating. We get more done. We build momentum. We start creating. We start growing. But all it is the opposite of the coin: ignorance, knowledge; worry and doubt, understanding; fear, faith. Opposite, opposite, opposite. But we got to start with what we want first.
Yeah.
Everything, every change, you have to want to change. You have to really desire to change. And if you don't desire to change, you're not going to bloody change. End of
Yeah.
story.
Yes, and I love to teach this too because for those who don't know, I've been teaching yoga since like 2013, maybe earlier, and I express it as openness versus closed, so contraction versus expansion, because we'll feel it in our bodies when tension starts to occur, such as like any of these fear-based thoughts. We tend to contract. And a lot of things happen when we start contracting our body all the time versus when we are open, we're free to move. We have this feeling of freedom. And it is these feelings of faith versus fear.
I love the different way of looking at it. And the more I'm studying and the more I read into stuff, and the more I look at, the more similarities I
Mhm.
see, not differences, similarity. Expansion, contraction, polar opposites. They still
Yep.
exist.
Yep.
And the spirit is always for expansion and fuller expression. There is a part of us, a little part. I kind of, when I'm explaining this, I talk about there's a part of us that's like a diamond in
Mhm.
the center of all of us. It's perfect. It cannot be improved upon. And then we have all this conditioning. It's all kind of like this mountain of shit covered over it. And then we put nail varnish and makeup and clothing around this mask of shit, when all we have to do is to get through that and be who we really are at our core, which is always for expression and expansion. Because every human being has something that they want to do, that they want to be, that they want to have, but for whatever reason, they don't allow themselves to entertain that idea because they have failed in the past. And because they failed in the past, they think they're going to fail again. Whereas not really, they have more awareness now than they did in the past. But
Mhm.
there are still things that we must overcome. And fear is one of them. Because when you go to do something different, guaranteed, because you haven't done it before, there's going to be some ignorance about it. And
Yes.
that's where worry, doubt, fear, bang, anxiety can step in and stop us from doing what we want to do. But when we understand what's happening, okay, worry, doubt, it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant, but I'm going to feel it. I'm going to do it anyway. And that's when you can push through to the other side of fear. You break through to the other side, and you develop your own freedom. Guaranteed, growth and freedom go hand in hand. You're not going to have one without the other. And even before we jumped on, I said, Jesus, amazing. I've been doing these for years and yet I'm still crapping my pants before we go live. But I'll still do it. I'll feel
Mhm.
the fear and I'll do it anyway. I think Susan Jeffers said that in her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But it's to understand what's happening. And it's through the understanding that we can, okay, this is not pleasant, but I can get through it. I can focus more and more on what I want and I can get to it. But I'm going to have to understand that there's going to be a bit of uncomfortableness. That's called stepping outside the comfort zone.
Yes, and our children are having to constantly step outside their comfort zone. That's normally when we're fighting with them the most because they don't want to do something that they're not comfortable with. Because it's
Oh, I find
safety
the
in
opposite to that, funnily. I'm trying
really?
to stop my kids doing stuff that I'm uncomfortable with. But I'm joking. I have a teenage daughter, remember?
Well, for example, like my children, they have perfectionism and they won't do something because they fear failing. And
100%.
right, like kids want to be accepted and they have this sense even larger than us adults because well, let's face it, they're in middle school and high school, and they really do get thrown underneath the bus, metaphorically, when other kids say they don't fit in. And understanding as adults, as parents, the subconscious and the conscious, I think, is the most pivotal change that we can make and the knowledge that we can bring on because when we know this, we start to understand how we are helping shape our children's subconscious and noticing like the things we say, the things we do, and they see us going through these changes. They see us pushing past fear or giving into fear. They see us when we're sad and when we're not, and they see it more than we do.
They will follow our example 100-fold over what we tell them to do.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the main reasons I decided I wanted to become the best version of myself, because there isn't a parent I don't believe out there that doesn't want to be a good parent. Now there's people that have terrible habits. There's addiction, there's loads. I could go on and on and on and on and on about how human beings can be bad. But I think one of the first things we need to understand is where there is a will, there is always a way. So, so many people can be very forgiving, even when you've made horrible mistakes, but only when you are seen to be making the proper efforts. I think Stephen Covey said it best when he said, "You can't talk your way out of what you've behaved yourself into."
Love
So
that.
you need to behave yourself, and that's where most of us, when we screw up, we first of all we don't own it, we don't apologize straight away, and we don't do it sincerely. Because my wife might kill me for this because we struggle with that, but I'm gonna throw her under the bus now because what she had the tendency when she'd screw up, she'd say, "Oh, my apologies," and that was like, "Are you for real?" I wanted to kill her because the way it was said and the tonality, I knew in my heart and soul it wasn't genuine. So you're better off not apologizing than doing a half-assed apology. So the
Hmm.
first thing when we screw up is to own it. I screwed up. And I've done this where I said, I'm terrible sorry, and then but.
Hmm.
Every time you put a but in an apology, you've just stuck your ass in your mouth. You are now talking out of your ass. Own
Yep.
the mistake.
And I
Own
find
the
this
mistake.
works great in the workplace. This works great if you have clients. This works great in a marriage with kids. This works great everywhere.
Everywhere. Everywhere. The point being, you're going to make a mistake, but it's to
Yes.
own, learn from it, and build on it. Because I can tell you, when I've screwed up and I was upfront, honest, and genuinely apologetic, I enhanced that relationship rather
Hmm.
than damaged it. Now, when I tried to be perfect and tried to hide my mistakes and tried to get that just leads to so much pain. Give a lie a half day head start, you'll never catch up with it.
This is true. And I've used this, and I think a scenario I can give is at work I did something and I kind of did it really fast because I was juggling a lot of things and someone caught it and they're like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, you know what? I rushed through that. I skipped over something. I'm really sorry. Going forward, I will make sure that I give this more attention." So I gave them my plan of how I'm going to shift and adjust. And they responded back like, "I appreciate you so much owning this and not trying to lie about it or blame someone else," because that's what they would normally get from other people. And it shows and it
100%.
builds trust, right? Like it builds trust to go, I know their character.
Well, you see, the key thing as well, and this happens in the home. when we're telling little white lies,
Yeah.
our kids, the only things kids lack are experience and vocabulary. They're not morons.
No.
The only thing a child lacks, if you think about it, if I show this part here for a moment, right? The the subconscious is in play from the second we're born. The
Yes.
conscious mind kind of starts developing when we're maybe anywhere from 3 to 5, depending on our own development. But from that point on, children understand. And they understand a hell of a lot more than we give them credit. The only thing they lack is experience and vocabulary, but they can see daddy sneaking out into the fridge, having something he shouldn't, or overeating the packet of crisps. Now, I'm just talking really simple things, but they see a lot more than we realize.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I would have taught many years ago when I did customer service training was when you're facing the customer, you're on TV.
Mhm.
Everything that you do is noticed. Your uniform, if it's clean, pressed, if you're clean shaven, if your nails are clean or dirty. Sadly, if you haven't proper personal hygiene, everything is noticed. And I'm sure people who have ever dined in a restaurant or a busy place, when they're served with somebody whose hygiene is not the best, it tends not to come back to that particular establishment. But here's
Mhm.
the kicker: the same rules apply everywhere. Our kids are watching every move we make. Are we showing them the right stuff? Are we showing them how we really want to be? And you're going to screw up. We're going to make mistakes. Of course we are. But when you start working on being your best version of you, when you're
Mhm.
really clear about what you really want, when you're willing to put the time, energy, and effort into yourself, it shows them that okay, you can put time energy into yourself. It's
Mhm.
important to put time and energy into yourself. We
Yes.
all want better for our kids. Every parent wants better for the next generation. But here's the thing: if we don't show them what better is, it ain't going to happen, because history will repeat itself, because there's shit that we're doing today that our parents did.
Yes. And their parents and their parents, and there's the
Exactly.
most subtle little things
And some of
that
it's good now. Hi mom, hi dad.
yes, and some of it is good, like, definitely, my dad is constantly about business and investing and all of that, like, I've learned a ton from my dad. But my dad also really hyper focuses on work, and I think he knows this. So and there's things that I have learned positively from my mom and things I've learned negatively from my mom because each and every one of us has our flaws, no matter how much we are working on ourselves. And sometimes we just have to own those as well and just go, this is who I
100.
am. I'm working on it
It's
or I'm not
owning
working on
every part of yourself. Because that when you don't own every part of yourself and you deny parts of yourself, from a psychological point of view, that creates different hassles. That's a whole other canon of a discussion there. We have to accept ourselves where we're at, whatever that is. Because when we can accept where we are right here, right now, and accept and not fight where we are right here, right now, that's when we
it.
can build. But when we're fighting the existing reality, we're putting our time and our energy into something that's already happened, which, when you think about it, is a little bit on the insanity side, yet we all do it. This
Yeah.
didn't happen, and I'm so angry and I'm so rage, blah, 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 and I'm using all my energy. I'm like the Hulk for a few minutes, but it's so pointless. And one of the things I've worked really hard myself the last 2 years, 3 years even, is to accept things quicker. Whatever it is to accept it quicker. Now, I'd be lying if I said I accept things instantly, because I don't. But I accept things a hell of a lot quicker now than I used to, because I understood the Buckminster Fuller's quote: to change, you cannot fight the existing reality. To change, you must build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. So, what is
Yes.
a new model? It's getting clear in your mind what you want, describing what you want, and working towards it.
I love that. And I think as we start to wrap this up today, I think this is beautiful to say, like, let's focus on these things and teaching our children this rather than sitting and sharing your stress or your worries with your children, to begin to tell them your hopes and your dreams, to tell them it's okay. I make mistakes too. These are the things that I'm working on. and involve them in it. Say like, hey, if you see this, let me know, because they've got better eyesight than you do on a lot of these things, and encourage them to talk about these things as well, because we have to talk about it, to invite them to talk about it, but to say, hey, like, what are your hopes and dreams? Because when we can know that we can start to see inside, and we can help them grow towards their aspirations as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And interestingly enough, when you're saying that and you're thinking about that for your children, you can think about that for your team if you're in business as well. Because
Yes.
here's the thing, if you're in a management position, in a boss position, a leader position, an owner position, the people will be looking up to you.
Yes.
You will have a lot more influence than you realize. And when you take the time, and again, I'm coming back to that point, the two most important things that I have to give anybody is my time and my energy. How
Mhm.
does a child spell love? Time.
Yep.
And when you can engage with them at their level, appropriate level, as I said, the
Mhm.
only thing they lack is experience and vocabulary. But when you can engage with them, what you're going to find is it's going to be mutually wonderful, because they're going to open up. Now, bearing in mind, please understand, you can't talk your way out of what you behaved yourself into. But
Yes.
if you're going to do something like this, you make a committed decision that that is how you're going to live going forward. Because if you start and stop and start and stop, I can tell you you're going to do more damage than good.
Yep. Yep. And it's the little things, as much as, having this in front of my face, in front of the kids or not, I try to put this down so that they also don't want to keep picking up tablets and turning TVs on. Presenting yourself in the
So
same
important.
presence, right?
So important. So important. I taught my kids years ago, and I took it from, I think it was The Seven Habits of Highly Effective Children. It was Stephen Covey's son wrote the book. And Stephen himself would have spoken about how do you communicate? How do you listen? You listen with your ears, with your eyes, and with your heart.
Mhm.
But that works two ways.
Yes.
And one of the things, and I love my dad to bits, but one of the things that used to infuriate me as a kid was him reading the newspaper and not acknowledging me. And then I noticed I was doing something similar, and eliminated it from my life. But again, it's having those conversations, because it's funny. One of the biggest fights I might have with my wife is when she has her face in the phone and I want to talk to her, because all of those feelings come back up. And obviously, I'm learning to let that go a little bit better.
Yeah, well, and most
But
of the time
it's
those
a pet
triggers
hate of
just
mine.
they're feelings that we've experienced before. They're feelings that we've had and experienced. So noticing, and we could go into a whole discussion on triggers alone.
Oh,
um,
listen, we all have them, but I suppose it's becoming aware of them. And okay,
mm,
so what way am I going to handle this going forward? Because the
yes,
best time to think of the best thing to do is not at the time you're trying to do it.
no, not
It's
at
called
all.
advanced thinking and advanced decision making. It helps.
It does. It does. I do that in like 12-week planning as well. Like, what's going to get in my way? What are the obstacles that are going to come up? It's so important to have that thought, not to kind of stress about the future, but to actively use that to help you in the future.
Exactly. Because I give an example, just I suppose we do need to probably wrap up, but it's part of what I do on a daily basis is I check in with myself in a journaling. Every day I will journal for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on what's going on in my life. Some days it's simple as just, I'm great, and that's it. That's the entry for the day. But what I found is I started doing this maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and and then I added to it, and I added to it, and I added to it. But every Sunday, I'll go back through the week. I'll write Sunday's journal entry first, and then I'll go back and read the journal entries for the week. And I'll ask myself three questions. What went well this week? Because I want to
Mm,
build on that.
yeah.
What didn't? Because I want to learn from it. And then what needs to change? Because when you get that feedback and you're doing nothing with it, nothing's going to change. And then I added another thing into it where I look at the monthly, depending on if there's 4 or 5 Sundays, I look at the 4 Sundays and see if I
Mhm.
can identify the patterns. And that helps me then work out what I need to work on going forward.
I think that is amazing, and I could only imagine how much better not only would the world be, but each one of our lives would be if we could take the time to do that, just to set an hour aside on Monday, and review the week. I mean, how amazing would that be? And to do that with ourselves, and maybe do that as a family too.
Everything that works for the individual will work for the group as well.
Yep, I agree. Well, thank you, Anthony, so much for joining me today. And we're going to be back next week as well. Next week, we're going to be talking more about anxiety, because sometimes we think, oh, anxiety, hogwash, and then we're really feeling it. And we're like, how do I manage this? Because anxiety might be also holding you back. So we're going to be looking at how we deal with that and being an entrepreneur as well. All right. We'll see you later.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.